Once upon a time, in the town where I grew up, there was a cave. And, back in the day, there were also a number of missing people. Most of the missing were young people, mainly young women. They disappeared mainly from cars parked in isolated areas, i.e., Lover's Lane. It didn't happen a lot, maybe once every year or two. Enough time passed between each disappearance that people forgot all about them, failed to see them as connected events, failed to see them as a serious problem. If the cops knew anything, they weren't sane. As for the authorities, their answer was to impose a curfew. Everyone under the age of 18 had to be off the street and at home by 10 p.m. Unfortunately, all those who had actually vanished were 18 or over. But what happened to us? What happened to us happened in broad daylight. It was Arsenault who told us about the cave. Arsenault. Not that we called him Arsenault. There's this cave at the base of the ridge. You can't really see it because it's hidden by all these bushes, but it's there. They used to hide booze there during Prohibition. Bry scoffed at that, although he scoffed at everything. Somebody said there had been a still hidden in the cave. A still, which was a little more credible. A little. A very little. Still, not that kind of still. Still, we had to check it out. There was fuck all else to do. The cave turned out to be a large hole at the base of the ridge, not far from the creek. I thought this was supposed to be a cave, I said to Arsenault in disgust. It is. It is. You have to crawl in, but you can stand up once inside. I got down on my hands and knees, of course. We all did, like sheep. My biggest worry was about getting my clothes dirty. But once inside, I was in for a surprise. There was an actual cave, and it was pretty large, probably about the dimensions of an average suburban living room. Now, the idea the place might have been used by bootleggers or for hiding a still seemed a lot more realistic. There was even an empty bottle of fortified wine lying just inside the entrance. 4 aces. Arsenault had brought a flashlight, and a good thing, too. In spite of the bright sunlight outside, it was pitch dark in there. He played the beam over the dark walls, then stopped. "What's that?" he said in obvious surprise. The beam of the flashlight had picked out a large opening or crevice at the back of the cave, an opening which appeared large enough to admit a person. "That wasn't here before," Arsenault said. It seemed to stun him. We all automatically took a step forward to take a better look, and all stopped. Dead. Something lay on the ground in front of the crevice, which, when we looked closer, turned out to be a bone. A large bone. Somebody, of course, had to say it. "What's that?" You can imagine the response. Gary knelt down and picked it up. It was a large bone, which I guessed might have belonged to an arm or a leg. As we all looked at it in the light from the flashlight, he said, Do you think it's human?" "I doubt it," I said. It probably belongs to some animal." Not that I knew what I was talking about. Gary suddenly jumped up. "You don't think a bear lives in here, do you?" "We don't have bears around here, dumbass," Bry said sarcastically. "Well, some kind of animal," Gary mumbled. I had noticed Arsenault had moved over to the crevice and was shining the flashlight inside it. I went and looked over his shoulder to see the fissure was wide enough to admit a small person, and that the ground inside was covered by a number of bones. Bones, including a few skulls. Human skulls. We were all crowding around the opening now, staring in both surprise and confusion. Bryce sputtered, "It looks like a fucking graveyard." We all started at that remark. We weren't all that far from an historic cemetery, although the old graveyard was atop the ridge on the opposite side of the creek from where we stood. The other guys scoffed when I mentioned it. "That's on the other side of the creek, man," Bryce said. "Yeah, but where else could they have come from? Maybe they've washed down from the other side. Water can work its way underground, you know." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Besides, the floor of the crevice was bone dry. No pun intended. You think maybe they were murdered?" Gary moaned. "Who?" Bryce scoffed. But Gary persisted. "All those kids that disappeared, that were never found. Nobody knows whatever happened to them. And I knew where Gary was going before he said, "Maybe it was the Hobs." The Hobs were a local boogeyman. Okay, boogie person. They were supposed to be a race of little people, less than 3 feet in height, who lived in the woods of the river valley. In fact, they were said to live underground. The First Nations people knew of them before the settlers came. The local whisper stream said that one had been captured by some dudes who were having a bush party atop the ridge. It was an albino humanoid thing with huge mole-like hands and large pointed ears. It made a weird but penetrating mewing sound which attracted a mob of the things, which attacked the party animals and rescued the captive. Or so the story went. I had never seen a hob. I didn't know anyone who had. Still, one night the previous summer, we slept out overnight in somebody's backyard. And of course, we had to have some snacks. So we headed out to a 24-hour supermarket about 6 blocks away in one of the seedier areas of town. The next day was garbage day, and all the bins and garbage cans were piled up for pickup next morning, adding to the generally depressing atmosphere of the mean street. We were walking past a low-rise apartment building when something suddenly leapt up, something pale, fish-belly white, about the size of a little kid. It appeared to have been digging through the garbage and ran away up the alley leading to the back of the building. We gave chase, only to find it had disappeared among the parked cars. Was that a hob? We talked it over on the way to the store and back. But hobs don't exist, right? Right? In the end, we decided it must have been some kind of animal. Although what animal, we couldn't have said. And so we forgot about it. But now I remembered and wondered if it had any connection to this. "Did one of you guys fart?" Bry demanded in a loud voice, which found all the rest of us shushing him, although we couldn't have explained why we wanted to shut him up. In truth, the cave was filled by a fetid stench, but a bad smell, more like rotting meat than flatulence. "Be quiet, you guys. I think I hear something," Arsenault said, his voice a whisper. And as we listened, we could hear it too, the sound of stealthy movement from deep within the crevice. Something was coming towards us. "Turn the light off," I said quietly. "It gives us away." Arsenault switched the light off. As we stood there in the Stygian blackness, the approaching sound became clearly audible. Something was coming. I see something," Arsenault hissed. In a moment, we all saw it. At first, just a smudge of reddish light, which gradually resolved itself into orbs, reddish orbs, floating in the darkness, floating towards us. And then we realized they weren't orbs. They were eyes, red eyes, pairs of red eyes, dozens of them. We didn't wait around to see any more. And you sure find out who your friends are when 4 guys try to get through a narrow opening at the same time. Oh man, it was wonderful to be out in the brilliant sunshine again. But still, we all ran back to our separate homes. And in future, we never spoke about what we had seen, as if speaking about it would confirm the reality of an experience we all knew was no act of imagination, and that if we spoke about them, the things, the Hobs, would somehow know we were talking about them and come after us. For the next few years, I avoided the area of the cave, the ridge, the creek, and only passed that way in broad daylight, and never by myself. Eventually, I left town to go to school. But I found myself thinking about the incident from time to time, and I wondered what the things really were. Were the Hobs a dwarfish race? A dwarf race of albino people living like moles in the tunnels and caves underneath the ridge? Or were they something worse? Something far worse. I remember my initial suspicion that all the bones must have come from the cemetery on the other side of the creek. Did these things live under the old cemetery? Live on corpses? Were they ghouls? Ghouls? I planned to never find out. But lately, a young woman, a University of Toronto student, disappeared one night while walking home from the local GO train station. Her path would have taken her to within a few hundred yards of where the cave had been. And she's not the only one who's disappeared lately. But dare I go back? Dare I? The following wire service story appeared later that summer. Oakville. Halton Regional Police continued to investigate the mysterious disappearance of Peter Woods, 50, of Calgary, whose rental car was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Oakville GO train station, not far from the valley of the 16-Mile Creek. Woods, originally from Oakville, had told family and friends he planned on revisiting some of his youthful haunts. Anyone with information as to Woods and his current whereabouts are asked to call Halton Regional Police at The moral of the story? It never pays to revisit old haunts. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was The Dread by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. You know, now that I'm finally at the end, my stomach finally settles down and quits growling. At the end. Yeah, the end.